Hey guys, so today I want to walk you through the process that I've been on as I have been using these tools that I've talked about this far to really tune into my own algorithm of abundance. So on Tuesday, when I sent out the videos, the audios about tuning into your algorithm of abundance, the main point I was really trying to hone in is that in order to be tuned in to our abundance algorithm or our abundance grid, we've got to be tuned into how we feel, and we've got to be turned on. We've got to move towards what we want. It's a different way of navigating. When we're in survival, we're always trying to think of how we can control the external so something doesn't happen, something bad doesn't happen. And we're moving away from what we don't want. That's the focus. When we're in abundance, we're moving towards what we want. And in order to know what you want, you have to be tuned into your desires. So abundance goes beyond what you need. And that's why when you really think to really start tuning in, this is what the process that has really worked for me, and I'm still fine-tuning it. But to start practicing my algorithm of abundance, the first thing that I learned to do in terms of tuning into the reality that you thrive in, that you're thriving, and then get to know who am I in a reality where I'm thriving, is first and foremost, imagine that all of your needs are met. Because so many times people can't even get to what they want, what they truly desire, because they're so in survival mode. So they think, well, I need money, I have to pay my rent, and I need this, and I need to do this, and it's all about their needs. And needs have to do with survival, and the idea that we can't get our needs met, or it's hard to get our needs met, have to do with all the beliefs that we've had that have been rooted in lack, and specifically the needs that haven't been met. Often we have, especially as empaths, we have deep emotional needs that go unmet our whole life, and then we wonder why we are unhappy. We develop the dynamics of treating ourselves the same way that we see others in the world treating us, or treating emotion specifically, treating sensitivity, especially in the world of success, that whole, kill yourself and to prove that you can do it and you have worth. And the body's not included. So first and foremost, imagine what it would be like. Let's imagine all your needs were met. Like, imagine right now, right here, right now, that your bills were paid for, and, all the little things that are on your mind that you're worried may or may not happen or whatever. Just imagine it's all settled and you know it. It's like everything's taken care of. And when everything is taken care of, if all is well, who are you in that space? What do you naturally move towards? Because when we get out of survival mode, we get to know a whole different version of ourselves. We get to know what we actually desire, what actually makes our soul come alive, which when we're in lack, when we're in survival mode, we never even get to tune in. And it's always about sacrifice. We're sacrificing what our deeper needs are because, well, this need has to be met. So I'll sacrifice my health. I'll sacrifice my sleep. I'll sacrifice my eating. I'll eat on the go. All these things in pursuit of success. And this is a really key thing to understand, because one of the primary reasons, especially empaths, get completely out of alignment in what they're doing is because they continue to bypass their deeper needs. So first and foremost, asking yourself, if all my needs were met, what actually would I start moving towards? What do I actually desire? What is my desire? Now, digging deep into desire, usually almost across the board, especially once your needs have been met, desire across the board is about relationships. Desire to be connected, a desire to be engaged, a desire to feel purpose, a desire to feel like your life matters, that you see your place in life. And that's what so many people don't get to because of being in survival mode. So the practice of tuning into that reality is huge. And even if you set your alarm on your phone and say for 3 minutes a day, my brother is actually the one who told me this. One of my brothers is very good at manifesting. He just always has been good at manifesting and making a really good life for himself. And he told me every single day, the one thing that he makes sure that he always does, he only does it 2 minutes, but he sets his phone for 2 minutes and he just imagines how he wants his life to feel. And he thinks of it in the sense like things are calm. I get to spend time with my kids and my wife. All is well, money's flowing well, and he just tunes into that vibration and he just lets that vibration envelop him. And it's a form of meditation, but in a literal sense, and especially in the sense that we're talking about in this class, which is in a vibrational sense, in a psychic sense. When you tune in to that reality, you start pulling it in. And in the case of being an empath, which is something that I keep talking about in this class, is that we think and feel palpably and strongly. So the more palpably we can interact with that reality in which we are thriving and make it less about the specifics. So like when my brother does it, he doesn't necessarily make it super specific. He makes it general. How do I want to feel? How does my ideal life feel? And ultimately, the feeling in relation to abundance always comes down to feeling free, being in flow, not having stress, being able to be fully present. So the more we tune into that reality, the more we become it and the more it's reflected back to us. So truly tuning into our algorithm of abundance is primarily learning the rhythm of it, learning the vibrational reality of it. And the only way to learn the vibrational reality is to tune into it. And this is where the magic of manifestation comes in, because the more you become intimate with that reality, your electromagnetic field shifts and that magnetic energy pulls things out of the blue, things you didn't expect. And so in relation to what we've talked about this far, and specifically in relation to business or what you do with work, so many empaths that I've worked with or even just heard in my groups talk about is that this is not even just an empath thing, this is a human thing. Often we won't make a step until we see the whole thing. We want to see it all. We want to know every step. We want to be guaranteed that it's going to be successful. We want to see how the money will come in. And by the way, this is a lot of how the formulas that sell you on these really high-end coaching packages, they play into that. Like people want to see if you do this work and you make these many calls, you make this much money. If you charge this much, you get, and it just like simplifies it all in the brain and it's satisfying. It's like, oh, okay, your brain has something to hold on to. I can do that. But if we're not including the vibrational reality of what that is, so an example for like the high-end packages, which was my first coach, that was the model. And I don't regret at all by doing the coaching because the coach was great. And I learned really quickly that wasn't my model. As soon as right down to, that specific model, part of it is you get on calls all the time, like sales calls essentially to try to see if you're a right fit for people. They don't talk about them as sales calls, but everything in me was like, I have absolutely no interest in spending any time, especially half an hour at a time, talking to people to see if I'm a right fit for them. You know what I mean? Like it just didn't at all appeal to me. It just felt draining and I didn't want to do it. And here's the thing. So many people will discount that. Like say if you had a similar, it could be a different circumstance, but something in you that's like, I don't want to do that. We automatically discount it and think, well, I'm lazy if I don't do it, or that's the only way to do it. Well, then how am I going to make money? Well, how am I going to get clients if I don't get on a phone call and try to convince them to work with me? Or how do I get, you know what I mean? Like, and so we discount that. And we usually always discount the things that our inner emotions are telling us. And this is where discernment comes in really strongly, because sometimes, as I said in the last video, there are times that we don't like being uncomfortable. The ego doesn't like being uncomfortable. It likes things that are familiar. And we've got to get really good at knowing the difference between being uncomfortable and going against our instincts and our intuition. There's a big difference. And the more we can get comfortable being uncomfortable, taking risks, trying new things, but listening to our intuition and instinct within that, and primarily considering our empathic abilities as part of the equation. Because it's not just, for me, it wasn't just, I don't want to get out and talk to people because I don't want to talk to people. It was, I don't want to be empathically drained call after call after call to just try to see if I'm a match to someone, because I know me and I know that a call to try to figure out if someone was a match for me would be a session in and of itself. And I felt like that just energetically doesn't feel sustainable to me. And I would rather figure that out through email. I'd rather make one video, talk about what my sessions are like. I would rather email people back and forth, answer their questions, and then they can choose one way or another. But I don't have any interest in getting on a phone call with people. And so that was a decision I made that really worked for me. That's just one example. But when it comes to, so what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to go through week 1 through 5, which we've talked about so far. And I'm just going to tell you what my process has been, like how everything I've been talking about relates to me. I'm going to make it super short. Oh, hopefully. I always say that, but what I'm hoping to give you is sort of an idea of the thought process that goes into it and the normal kind of calibrating that happens when you're running a business. And even a lot of successful people that are entrepreneurs will tell you the same thing. You cannot wait until everything's perfect. You've got to just pull the trigger at some point. You have to just start. And pulling the trigger is the perfect analogy, because when you're shooting a gun, like if you're shooting a target and you want to hit the bullseye, you have to first shoot. And then you see where you hit, and then you adjust your aim from there. You calibrate. If you don't pull the trigger, you can never calibrate. You can't necessarily know even how to aim without first pulling the trigger. Because it's one thing to just see, but you've got to feel palpably the way the gun moves through your hand, the way the power shoots through, or in a bow and arrow, whatever you want to imagine in this case. But you have to be able to, it's an experience that you have with the tool that you're shooting to hit a bullseye. And you have to get to know that your relationship with that tool and how it works for you and with you and what way that it feels best to hold it and how the whole thing. It's not something you can do in your mind alone. There has to be an action. And then the action, when you first shoot a target, you then first of all, you see where you hit, and then okay, I need to move this much further to the right. So you have to calibrate. And the point of saying all this is that if we wait until everything's perfect, we never know. And I would say that's the one thing that I've learned that I have resisted the whole time, but yet had to do. In everything that I've done, I've just had to step out and do it, because I haven't seen necessarily anyone doing it the way that felt comfortable to me. I knew what I didn't want. And I didn't know how things would turn out. When I first started, I didn't even have really good equipment for anything. I just had to start. I just started with what I had, which was literally nothing. I started a blog. I didn't have any money up front to do anything, but I just started. And from there, by pulling the trigger, putting an article out, doing certain things, sending it to people, interviewing people, it started getting a momentum. And in that momentum, I got to see what kind of people I attracted in through that experience, and then how it felt, and then what I needed and where I needed to adjust. And in the very beginning, my tendencies as an empath to be accommodating and to not listen to my inner self were obviously very strongly there. And what I ended up learning very quickly is without boundaries, you can completely drain your energy on things that actually don't provide an investment back into yourself, and also don't even necessarily pay off in any other way. And I had to go through all these, mind hoops. The biggest hoop I had to get through was just understanding that if I wanted to thrive, I had to work with who I was, rather than trying to become something I wasn't, or trying to fit myself into someone else's box. I know I've said this quite a bit. So in week 1, when I talk about answering the call for the win-win-win, for me specifically, and my suspicion is this is true for probably most empaths, the biggest obstacle here is realizing that if they want to thrive, they've got to consider that they're empathic. because it changes everything. When you absorb energy at the level that empaths do, it's, first of all, just on the central nervous system alone, it's a lot. And if you also, on top of it, aren't skilled at regularly clearing your energy, allowing yourself to cry if you need to cry, going in nature, just releasing. A lot of empaths don't know how to do that because, again, they discount how they feel. Then massive energy builds up and builds up and builds up. And it feels energetically heavy, very, very heavy. So then your inspiration is very low because you're exhausted. And then guilt kicks in because you can't run like the Energizer Bunny. And we've been told in our society that that's what you're supposed to do to be successful. And if you really deconstruct that whole belief is saying serve the system, serve the master, which is the collective, that is whatever its needs are, and spin yourself out for that. Literally make yourself sick for that. And in the end, you'll be praised for what you can do, which always is fleeting and never lasts. And as soon as you're sick and you die, it's like, okay, just next person. Do you know what I'm saying? So if you really, really get to the bottom of that belief of why we discount ourselves anyway, it's sick. It's rooted in slavery. It's rooted in servitude. It's rooted in owned or be owned. So that being said, number one, when you start thinking about what is my algorithm of abundance, include who you are as an empath, as a highly sensitive person, as an artist. What makes me feel good? What are my ideal circumstances? Like, what's my ideal dynamics? And this kind of goes back to, well, actually, I'll get into this as I continue on. But so answering the call, this part of it for you is really making sure that you have committed to including your empathic abilities in the equation. It's part of the win-win-win. Your body, your mind, and your heart, yourself, others, and the planet. You include yourself in the equation, which is the key thing most people are missing. Week 2, leveraging your gifts. So when I started learning how to include myself in the equation, at first it was just like, okay, well, I'll make sure I take naps if I need to, or make sure I sage, or I make sure I take salt baths or crystal baths, or I make sure I put a white light around me, or go walking. Those are all great tips. But what the next level is in terms of really tapping into astronomical abundance is knowing how to leverage your gifts. And that's what we talked about in week 2. Not just the fact that you're empathic and take care of that, but you're an empath, and what does that mean, and how is it valuable, and how can you leverage it? How can you use it you're empathing anyway. You're tuning in anyway. You're processing anyway. So where can that be used in a valuable way? And that's through doing sessions, because initially for me, I was just doing online classes. And then I started having people ask me if I could work with them one-on-one. And through doing that, I learned quickly, again, pulling the trigger. You don't know what you don't know. So you have to try first. And it's crazy what my sessions were like in the very beginning to what they are now. And I used to do a lot of free sessions in the beginning too, just because I had to try. I just had to start. I learned very, very quickly what worked and what didn't. I learned the main thing I learned by leveraging my empathic gifts is that I was way more intuitive than I thought. Way more. Because we don't know. Our genius zone is so normal to us that we don't know that there's anything different about it. And that's why we often discount it. But one of the ways I used to do sessions in the beginning is I would have someone send me their pic, because I've always done phone sessions. I don't like video. It just throws a dynamic in that it throws me off. So I would have people send me a picture of them before the session so that I could read them, because I need a visual to just kind of get an idea of someone's energy. And then I would write down everything that intuitively came to me I would always tell them to send me a recent photo, because obviously your energy changes a lot. And I would write down everything that came through, and I would be amazed at the stuff that would come through. And sometimes I was like, is this me making stuff up, or is this accurate? And it blew me away when I would talk to people. When I would start the session, I would tell them first, before I even let them talk, everything that came through. And 99% of the time, people were just like, holy shit, Like, how did you pick that up from my picture? And to me, I realized so quickly, I do this all the time. It's just that I'd never usually talked about it. And I would never necessarily ask people. So I didn't always get feedback. And occasionally I would. And there was, I had a strong intuition that I was intuitive because I would have situations happen that were, you guys all know because you're all intuitive. But it wasn't until I started practicing using my gift that I realized how valuable it could be to other people, and that I literally could mirror to them the things they couldn't see. And that by mirroring it to them, I gave them a navigation point. It's like I helped them look at, if you shifted here, everything could shift for you. It's one thing I realized quickly I was able to do is to narrow in on the block. So actually learning that my gifts were valuable and seeing up front and up close and personal how much you can help someone by offering space and feedback for them and clarity and hitting on all the things that humans need. First of all, we need connection deeply. And one of the first things I learned is that the things that I reject about myself, or I used to reject about myself, which was anything under the weird category, was actually the things people were hungry for the most. And even to this day, people will set up sessions with me that are basically like, no one in my life knows that I would even do this. And people in careers and things that you would never expect, they were into this kind of stuff. And they're dying for someone to talk to. So that was another thing, like, wow, the more people that own it, that just, if you own your gifts, own your weirdness, own what you're into, and just fully own it instead of rejecting it, you create a space for the millions of other people who are also in that, and it is millions of other people who also want to embrace that point of themselves. But because we're controlled by the collective, and the collective mindset still pretends that that's not real, and subtly guilts and shames people for having emotions, or for acting as if there's a reality apart from the one the eyes can see. This is all very old school stuff, which is changing because science is literally changing. But the collective has literally been terrified. The ego of the collective has not wanted to see that there's something outside of what can be seen physically. So leveraging your gifts and really understanding that this is needed, that people are starving for it. And it's not just people who will have a conversation with them about this stuff, but the particular way that you empath and those things you pick up on and the things that are the most subtle and that you've always naturally zoned into. You can read and you can process certain things that is directly related to how you were wounded, how you survived, and therefore what is actually valuable about you. Because if you were wounded in a specific way and you learned how to survive, that survival mechanism is a tool. And this, to me, right here is where a lot of people get stuck, even in doing intuitive type of business, because they still discount. And a lot of people, there's this kind of shaky ground, like feeling a little bit afraid to come out in any way, even using the words. Like, I didn't even know what to call myself. Empath was the closest thing that resonated, but even using a word, describing myself at all feels limiting. It's hard to have any sort of label. But it's important when it comes to building a new reality. It's okay to use words and come up with a vocabulary and share it with others and just start trying to connect. So leveraging your gifts is key. And I would say this right here is an important step that it seems like a lot of you in the class are either learning for the first time or realizing you missed that piece. You missed yourself. You were just trying to follow a formula of business, but you didn't include yourself in the equation, your unique self. And in order to thrive, in order to really tune into your algorithm of abundance, you've got to include your unique self, not just you're a human and you need to sleep and eat. You are not just a human. You are a unique human that is unlike anyone else on this planet. And because of that, you have a perspective that no one else has on this planet. And you're connected to everyone. So when you share your perspective, you mirror things that other people can't see. And it's incredibly an important piece of the whole conversation when it comes to shifting out of lack, especially empaths. I can't even emphasize this enough, but I truly believe because we've witnessed, and not just witness with our eyes or our mind, but witness palpably in our emotional field, the human condition and the whole lack matrix, the insanity of it over and over, the insanity of trauma that never gets healed because we're not making our hearts relevant. You have immense data. And one thing I've learned through myself and also working with other empaths is that when you start looking within, often it's shocking to realize how much wisdom you have. But if you discount it, it's like never investing it. It's the equivalent of losing all your inheritance because you don't even at least put it in the bank to earn interest. Like when we don't learn from our experiences, we don't actually get the benefit of the experience. And the benefit of the experience is why we came to be alive in the first place. That's why we urged to be here. So you see how important this is. So including yourself in the equation, which is part of the win-win, connecting to the win-win-win, and then leveraging your gifts is key. And then week 3, we talked about tuning into your ideal client, your ideal grid. So I've already covered this so much, but just in relation to what I've learned is that as I've worked with clients, I quickly was able to see the people that I was not only really could help, but really was just in it, like interested and wanted, like all of me was present. And the things that I didn't feel like either were my territory or sometimes just certain people trigger you or that you're not the right fit or whatever. And again, this is about pulling the trigger. You have to just see first. But the more you just have the experience, the easier it is to tune in. You start really tuning into the rhythm of where you are best used, which can always change because it's meant to change as we grow and change. And the people that I was interested in working with in the beginning are different than the people that I'm interested in working with now because I've changed. And it's okay to let room for that. And I think that's also one of the pitfalls of branding yourself right out the gate, which is what those packages sell you to do. If you already know your brand and you're excited about it and you absolutely know all this, then you're probably not even in this class to begin with. But that's great. And those formulas work for a reason. They work for if you're in that space. But in order to really know who your ideal client is, you have to know yourself and you have to know what you give a damn about. And every client you work with, I mean, I know some of you aren't necessarily working with clients one-on-one, but this applies to your audience as well or your customer. They are always going to reflect something about you back to you. And this is always an opportunity to learn. And I always say, go for the lowest hanging fruit in the sense of what's needed right now on the planet more than anything is love. So instead of picking the things that are the hardest to love, instead of having to always put ourselves in situations where we're having to work hard or stretch ourselves or challenge ourselves, which is such the rhetoric of the lack matrix. It's always about challenging yourself and the ego gets a huge boost out of that. But when you're empathic and you're already ultra sensitive, putting your heart through just constantly having to feel challenged, emotionally speaking, can actually be quite damaging to your morale, to your just desire to even want to live. And so I really think when it comes to your ideal client, go for the low-hanging fruit. That's why I talked about in that week, what's the easiest thing for you to love? Where do you actually want to provide value? What actually just brings you joy that's fun for you to do? If you're not working with clients specifically, it could be, what if you do, you make jewelry or you do tarot readings or you just post art or whatever it is, something that literally brings you joy that just feels easy for you to do. To me, that's the low-hanging fruit, and it makes the most sense to leverage your gifts there in terms of having abundance start to flow into your life. Because the more complicated you make it, and especially when you're in the beginning of trying to start your business, if you constantly are trying to challenge yourself and do things that don't feel good, again, you drain your energy and you make yourself more uncomfortable on top of how uncomfortable it is just being in new territory and starting something new. And then often entrepreneurs are very alone and we have this perfectionist idea and we don't want to share if we've made mistakes. We don't realize that mistakes are literally what it means to be an entrepreneur. You have to be willing to just like jump in and just pull the trigger and then recalibrate and recalibrate and recalibrate. And that's why people who jump into new territories and just have their back all the way through, like, I'm not going to abandon myself. And I also know that I'm going to learn and I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to hold room for that. And everything that I learn is going to make the next round better and better and better and better until I get so fine-tuned that I can just hit that bullseye. I don't have to pull the trigger 5 times to hit it. I can just hit it. That's what we're learning to do. And I really feel like for me, that's the point that I'm at. And this particular class, you guys, not even just you, how I set it up really taught me a lot, because I feel like the biggest thing I learned through this is I don't even really think I understood. I've done a few beta tests. They've actually all been slightly different, but now that I'm tuning into the rhythm of this, if I were to go back, the thing that would have made everything so much more smooth if I could have just really understood what I was doing in a beta test and really explain the experience people are going to have up front. Like, hey, this is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to feel like. Most likely you're going to be triggered. This is going to be challenging you at a core level. This is not like a class as much as it is a conversation, all those things. If I would have been upfront with that, if I would have known how to make that very, very clear in the beginning, it would have been effortless, in the sense of anyone getting into it would have known exactly what they were getting into. But because I was unclear, it was unclear. I kind of knew, but I kind of didn't. And I kind of didn't because you don't know until you're in it and you know what you're doing. So all that to say, there's a lot of patience and compassion involved in just letting yourself pull the trigger and then recalibrate from there. So now I know if I were to ever do a beta test again, exactly how to market it, quote unquote, exactly how to sell it, exactly how to talk about it. It would be effortless, because really how to talk about anything you do is to be as transparent as you possibly can. And people respect that. And I think that with me, the one thing I've noticed is that when you're presenting anything or selling anything, there's this energy that comes in that it has to look a certain way or it has to be a certain way and has to follow a certain formula. Again, back to the formulas. Even though that's not even what I teach, it's amazing how much it still seeps in. And then I end up putting a sales page up that doesn't necessarily feel good. I don't feel like it really talks about what I want to talk about, but now I realize the more honest and authentic and transparent you are, in the sense like, putting up a page, hey, this is a conversation. It's going to be really weird. It's going to be like, things are going to come at their own times. You have to jump in with no expectations. If you want to go on this journey with me, feel free. But it's kind of an unknown, But if you're adventurous and you want to jump into this conversation and this experience, then jump in, and it's gonna be more and more recalibrated, So hopefully that makes sense to you. What I'm saying is that you get to know, when you try something, you get to know what works and what doesn't work. And then the other piece that I think is lacking in a lot of the business world is just being really authentic. It is changing. A lot of people are doing this now, but being really authentic and transparent about the fact that there's a whole bunch you don't know. And that it's like a lot of life in general is just an experiment, including your business. And depending on what you do and what business you have, obviously there's lots of different models, but this is particularly speaking more to entrepreneurs, more to people who are doing like online businesses, coaching, things like that. So just that ability to just go for it. And in the sense of knowing your ideal client, really knowing yourself. When you know yourself, you know who your ideal client is. If you're not tuned into you and your needs, you don't have a clue who your ideal client is, because your mind will just go to what it thinks it should have or who it thinks it should have versus what actually would be good for you. And this goes back to this is another thing I really have asked myself as I've worked with clients. It's like, who are my ideal clients? And I mean, I've always honestly had really good clients, but I've realized the conversations that really get me fired up are usually when people are walking the same path as me, but just like a step behind or 2 steps behind. And it gives me the opportunity to love my past self, love the me that was there, and hold space for the things that I know I didn't get space held for. And it's like, by holding it for another person, I'm giving it to myself as well. And that is healing. And that goes back to what I talked about in the sense of everything we do is always communicating with our past and our future. So when we do things differently, when we have the opportunity to give what we didn't get, whether we're giving it to ourselves or another, we're healing that neural pathway, and we're creating a reality in which, needs can be met. Just because they weren't met here doesn't mean they're forever and always never met, which is what trauma does. It plays the same thing out over and over again. So moving on to week 4, is that the week after? Yeah, week 4, tuning into your astral network. I went deeply into this with you guys already, but I would say the biggest takeaway I've had in terms of tuning into my algorithm of abundance is, again, really tuning into, I had to really get serious and honest, super honest about who I am, what I truly like and what I don't like. And I had to realize that, yes, there's a part of me that has always known I was going to be public, and getting comfortable with being public was important. And so YouTube was a big, huge, massive for that for me, to get over my fear of being seen. And even still, through YouTube, I've learned I have zero interest in being massively public. Not only no interest in it, but I know that's not what I wouldn't thrive in that. I wouldn't thrive in that situation. And, using your imagination is one of the best ways to connect with and establish a psychic connection, or establish a neural pathway, so to speak, with your future. So you have to know which future you want to tune into, because there's an infinite amount of futures. And often we think it's just fated and that we'll end up wherever we end up because we're meant to. And that is true in a sense, but a lot of things that seem fated only occur because of deep programming that is immersed in trauma that has never been healed. So it's a trauma thing playing out over and over and over again. And it's meant to be, quote unquote, because you are meant to to shake the trauma out. You're meant to release the trauma. So the constant repeat is giving you another opportunity and another opportunity to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the trauma until you can really understand it and work through it and fully release it, and release the beliefs that you picked up because of the trauma. So, and really, healing from trauma is realizing that, yes, that happened, but it doesn't have to keep happening, and it's not the only reality. And realizing that, there's a reality in which your needs can be met, in which you can be seen, in which you can be heard and can be loved and can be witnessed and can be connected and can have abundance. I want to tune into that reality. If it's real, then by having it, it heals the part of me in my central nervous system that believed I could never have it. And so when we tune into our algorithm of abundance, when it comes to the future, this is a super important part. And so for me, I've had to really get clear about what my ideal reality is. And it has helped me it helps me calibrate, because then I hold that vibration, and I know when you have a really good taste and a really good sense of how you want your future to feel, it's a different thing than what you want it to be. Like, I want to have this many subscribers, and I want to have this car, and I want to do this vacation, and my house is going to look like this, and like the material aspects of it. That's all great and fine, but that's actually not what your soul's urging for. When you get in touch with your soul's urge, it is so much deeper than that. Your soul doesn't necessarily give a shit about the material things as much as it does about its relationship to those things. So if you're in a relationship in your future, what does that relationship feel like? How do you feel inside? Not making it about the other person and who they are and all their qualities, but about you. What do you feel like when you are relating to your life with an open heart? It's emotional sovereignty on every level, true abundance. And it's only by tuning into that reality that we really start to see that it's not about anything external from us. It is truly about the energy we hold within. And if we're not holding it now, we're not going to line up to it. So tuning into our algorithm of abundance and into our ideal grid, or our ideal network of support, is relating to life in a way that feels good versus in a way that feels negative. So how do you relate to things? And that's why I talked about one of the highest leverage points we can play in terms of shifting everything is looking at what is the one thing that I keep doing over and over and over again that keeps putting me in the same situation, and how can I shift it? Or what's the one belief that I have? And then if I can change that, everything from that point on would shift. And for me, it was that I mattered. Like I truly didn't know. I knew I was valuable, like logically speaking, but I didn't know that my internal world was as valuable as it is. I didn't know it could be as valuable as it has been for myself and others, massively valuable. And so it really, when I personally tune into my ideal network, I have a close knit of people that I co-create with. And I keep it like when I feel it, it's not about having a business partner or the specifics aren't what I focus on as much as it's how do I feel? I feel so excited. I feel engaged. I feel like my mind is stimulated. I feel like we're a part of something bigger than ourselves. I can feel that this is exactly connected to free energy, much of what I'm doing. And that it's just like people getting free and us getting more sustainable and really tapping in energetically to what it feels like to be self-sustaining, which is what we actually are. Our whole body and our electromagnetic field is self-sustaining, which is ultimate abundance. So then I start really tuning into what's that code then? What does it feel like to be self-sustaining in your own body? What does it feel like when your electromagnetic field is flowing in your Merkaba pattern or your the toroidal field around your body is completely self-sustaining, and it's the energy field around all living organisms. It's completely self-sustaining. It runs itself. But we get out of alignment. Our electromagnetic field gets out of alignment when we block the energy in our body, when it doesn't flow. And this is directly connected to our humanity's, what's the word I want to say? Struggle or conflict with itself. With the fact that it's creative by nature, that it's sexual, that it creates. So by taking it all the way down, like to the deepest thing, to the thing that matters to me most, which is freedom, everything to me has to center around that. So that means my network, astrally speaking and physically in my life, I know, even though I may not know all the specifics about what's coming, I know absolutely I'm lining up more and more and more every single day to a reality that feels safer, more secure, more supported, more intimate, not more vulnerable, not more. And this is where a lot of times in the past people have sold out when, like, say you have something that's it's hot in the sense that it's trending and it's about to take off. And then a lot of people with money want to own it, come in and own you and own it. And by doing that, by allowing someone to own you or something to own you rather than your own heart, it instantly takes you out of the very thing that's valuable, which is your ability to navigate via your urge. And so a lot of times when people imagine their future, they imagine, some big company supporting them or an investor or whatever, and don't consider how they want that relationship to feel. And so automatically opportunities come up that are more servitude-like in nature or enslaving or codependent. And we say yes because we're thinking of the result, like, oh, this will bring me this amount of money. So yes. Rather than, yes, it'll bring you this amount of money, but you're also going to be enslaved to these people's wishes and desires. You have to do it this way. This is just one example. But this is a huge way people sell out and maybe get money, but lose their heart in it or lose their freedom in it. And if we're creating abundance, then it makes absolutely no sense for us to do that. So tuning into your algorithm of abundance is knowing, like, who am I in a world where I'm thriving? It's sovereignty on every level. It's running your own kingdom. You're not slave to anyone. Doesn't mean you won't work for someone. Some of you may. But my point is relationally, the abundance matrix is about healing our relationships to all things. Our relationship to ourself, our body, our heart, our others, the planet, our relationship to money, our relationship to even life itself, like the meaning we're giving it, our relationship to the story we're telling in our head. That is what is wanting to be healed. Instead of continually telling the story of lack, we tell a new story. So how does that new story feel in your body? And the one thing I've noticed, the momentum's getting faster and faster, which in some ways can be scary because it means you really need to line up, is that the more I tune into that reality in which I'm thriving, the way less action I take, and people come and things come out of the freaking blue. It's happened over and over and over. The things that I thought I had to get involved in, something in me is like, no, just back up because I don't see a clear step. And just, it's saying, tune into how you want it to feel. Imagine how it feels. Keep moving towards that feeling. Even if it means going for a walk. Even if it means doing something that has nothing to do in this moment with your business. I can't tell you how many times I've done this when I've had deadlines coming up and I need to sell in my mind. I've set these goals to sell a certain amount of classes or whatever. And so that you always have to make sure all is covered when you're an entrepreneur. There's a certain baseline amount of money you need to make to sustain your life. So all of this, like having goals or you've got to kind of know what's going on. And what I've learned, at least with me, is there's this really fine balance between getting too involved in making in the how of it and just actually holding space for, I know what it feels like. I know that all my bills are paid. I know that I'm happy in my heart. I know that I'm continually trusting the universe more. I know I'm getting more tuned into what my fire is and my urge and my passion. And I know that as I bring that out, I'm bringing out something extremely valuable and I'm creating a platform for others to join. And I'm calling in people who are literally my tribe. The tribe vibe. Activating the tribe vibe is huge. When you have it activated in you, the tribe vibe to me is that space where you feel totally supported and loved and seen and connected to the world around you. And it doesn't matter how that happens. It matters that you tune into it. And then those things come. And so I can't tell you how many times that I have done this where my mind is kind of freaking out, like, you need to sell this many classes, or you need to do this, or maybe you need a new client, or now you should get mentoring, like you should mentor someone, even though in my heart there's times I know I don't want to mentor anyone this month because I'm going through my own processes and I'm healing something, or I'm just way focused on classes or whatever. And I've learned really quickly that if I mentor people for money alone, it is not a good exchange. It doesn't feel good. And because I'll end up saying yes to clients that I'm maybe not a match to. And that's not fair to either one of us. So I've learned very, very, very quickly that if I make it about that, I start lining up to things that don't feel good. And I start lining up to sacrifice again. And I start lining up to not caring about myself. And it can spiral out really quickly in terms of my empathic gifts. It can spiral out very quickly when I'm not considering, if I don't feel good, nothing feels good in my reality. So first, because I'm an emotional being primary, first and foremost, that's just my dominant personality. Other people are logical beings. I am not. I am logical to an extent, but I am primarily emotional. So if I don't consider that, and I just make all these plans and all these goals without considering, or even all these friends or these networking connections without really tuning into how they make me feel, then I get myself wrapped up and tied into a reality that I feel choked by. And then I feel guilty because I feel like I can't say no because I said yes to all these things that I only said yes to because logically speaking, they sounded good, but I didn't tune into how they actually made me feel. And the number one thing I've learned is that my discernment never, ever, ever, ever has been off. Not once. Not once has my inner being led me astray. I have not listened to it before, and I've learned why I should. But not once, even when it makes no sense, when I've actually listened to how I felt and taken it into consideration and slowed down or stopped or paused and said no or whatever I needed to do, just readjusted, not once have I regretted that decision. And so now it's a no-brainer. And now I know so strongly that even if someone came, and I've literally thought about this, just, when you think of like the biggest scenarios. So for example, like the first time when I realized like Kristen Bell was, she started following me on Twitter, the actress Kristen Bell. And I remember thinking like, my mind kind of went into that world like, wow, who's watching me? You never know who's actually watching me. Because I've heard her talk about being an empath before. And so I'm sure she was Googling something about empaths and found me. But, my mind went down that road, and then I thought, what would it feel like to like be on that sort of a level? Like, what if someone wanted to interview you on a TV show? And you know what? Instantly, when I tuned into my intuition, it was like, no. And I really know that I would literally say no, because I do not feel like I'm meant to be on a main, huge, big platform. I'm meant to be behind the scenes a little. I mean, I'm meant to be seen and known by the people who are meant to see and know me. But I don't think I would, I know I wouldn't thrive in that scenario, at least not right now. And not only that, it doesn't even feel good to me when I feel that reality out. And that was just really interesting to me to know that. And it felt like this immense relief, like, oh, well, it's so weird how that's just kind of in the collective program, that's the best thing that could happen to you, is to get sort of like national exposure. And what I realized, like when I felt out the potential of that, it literally felt like that would actually destroy me. It would not feel good at all, especially with where I am at the moment. You know, with things like the seeds germinating and so many things taking root. Just like when a seed is germinating, it needs to be hidden for a while. And if too many people, if you keep digging it up, or if there's too much sun on it or whatever, it doesn't actually sprout up. So there are conditions that are important to consider, especially when you're at the vulnerable stages of your creation. It is not wise to bring everyone into it. It's not wise to even tell everyone about what you're doing. It's not wise to reveal too many of your vulnerabilities to people that you don't trust. It's really important to tune into this. And empaths, I truly believe, are privy to this. Empaths are... you have an advantage when it comes to this. So if you can utilize your gifts, if you can leverage your empathic abilities to say, okay, I'm going to use them to help me navigate my business. And if I trust myself, I know that if I trust my empathic abilities, I will not be led astray, because my emotional self, my intuition tells me really far off when something's coming. I can tell so quickly when something's off. And I've learned now that I don't even have to understand why. I don't need to know why. It used to be that my mind would have to analyze it. Like, well, what's wrong and who's wrong? And maybe this person is this way. And I don't know. What do you think? That I would overanalyze. Now I realize it doesn't matter. Everyone's worthy of love. No one's bad. It's not about any of that. It doesn't feel good. No. The answer is no. It's just because sometimes it's just purely the time. It's not the timing. Sometimes it's the wrong path just simply because of reasons we can't even fathom. It's not because anyone's wrong or that path is wrong or bad or anything. And when we navigate having to always look at what's wrong, what's right, what's good, what's bad, what's going to help me succeed, what's going to help me fail, it's that duality. It's not activating what we truly are, which is a trinity. There's more than two things involved here. It's not duality. Abundance is not duality. So hopefully this was helpful for you. I wanted to kind of go through up to week 4, how I've kind of utilized these techniques that I'm talking about in my own life to establish my own personal algorithm of abundance. The better I've gotten at this, at considering my empathic abilities, the win-win-win, considering all of me, and then leveraging them, knowing, okay, if this is primarily what I am, then I want to invest this in the world. Like I want to invest this in my world, in my thriving, in my growth, and others' growth, because it's the most natural thing for me to do, because it's what I am. So why would I try to do something I'm not? And then really tuning into my ideal client in the sense of, what do I truly care about? Who do I want to talk to? Who do I want to engage with? Who do I want to love? Who do I want to learn from? And then the same with the astral network. Our astral network, we do not know who's coming. And when we try to plan it all, I know this person would be the best to work with, and I want to do this, and I want to be in this, and we don't know that may not be the best thing for us. So if we focus instead on how we want to feel, and allow what is the reality in which I'm thriving feel like, and allow those emotions and that feeling and that vibration to just build and build and build within us, then we pull things that we didn't even know were coming, but they're the perfect fit and the perfect match, because it's a match to that feeling. So I hope that was helpful for you guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, and specifically this week about finding your algorithm of abundance. I'm amazed at you guys, and there's been several of you that have said you're shutting down your business and changing a whole different direction, and I'm just sort of blown away, because we're challenging things at a core level, but it seems like what a lot of you have realized